I, 29F, have been dealing with ongoing issues with my stepbrother Robert, 31M, for years now, but things really came to a head at my recent engagement party. To give you some context, I've known Robert since I was 12 when my mom married his dad. My parents had divorced when I was 8, and those 4 years were just me and my mom against the world. We were incredibly close, and I felt like I could tell her anything. Then she met Robert's dad, and everything changed. From the beginning, Robert and I never really got along. He was always the golden child in our blended family, while I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells. I remember the first time I met Robert, it was at a dinner where our parents announced their engagement. Robert spent the entire meal sulking and making snide comments. When I tried to make conversation, he just glared at me and said, "Don't think you're going to be my sister. I don't need one." I was hurt, but I tried to brush it off, thinking he just needed time to adjust. Growing up, Robert would frequently borrow my things without asking and return them damaged or not at all. I had this beautiful charm bracelet that my dad had given me before he moved away for work. One day, I came home from school to find Robert had taken it to impress a girl he liked. When he finally returned it, half the charms were missing. I was devastated, but when I complained to our parents, they brushed it off as siblings sharing or told me I needed to be more understanding since Robert was having a hard time adjusting to the new family dynamic. This pattern continued throughout our teenage years, with Robert taking advantage of my belongings, my personal space, and even my friends. There was this one time when I was 15, and I had my first real crush on a boy named Alex. I confided in Robert about it, thinking maybe we could bond over something. Instead, he used that information to humiliate me in front of the entire school, telling everyone embarrassing stories about me that he twisted to make me look bad. Alex never spoke to me again after that. I remember one particularly hurtful incident when I was 16. I had been saving up for months to buy tickets to see my favorite band, the Midnight Echoes, in concert. I worked extra shifts at my part-time job at the local ice cream shop, skipped lunches, and even sold some of my old clothes to save up enough money. The day before the show, I came home to find Robert and his friends in my room, going through my stuff. They had found the tickets and Robert had decided to take them and go to the concert with his friends instead. When I told our parents, they scolded Robert half-heartedly but didn't make him give the tickets back. They told me I should have hidden them better and offered to buy me new ones for a different date, but of course, it wasn't the same. The Midnight Echoes broke up a month later, and I never got to see them live. As we got older, Robert's behavior didn't improve. After I moved out for college, I thought I'd finally have some space from him. But Robert had a knack for inserting himself into my life at the worst moments. During my sophomore year, I was struggling with a particularly difficult course load and a part-time job. Robert showed up unannounced at my dorm, claiming he was in the area. He lived 3 hours away, and needed a place to crash. He ended up staying for a week, eating all my food, leaving a mess, and distracting me from my studies. I nearly failed 2 exams because of his visit. When I graduated and got my first apartment, Robert would show up uninvited, eat all my food, and leave a mess. He'd ask to borrow money and never pay it back. One time, he borrowed my car for what he claimed was a job interview. I later found out he'd taken it on a road trip with his friends, returning it with a dented fender and empty gas tank. He'd make promises to help with things and then flake at the last minute. When I was moving to a new apartment, Robert promised to help. I waited all day for him to show up, only to get a text at 9 p.m. saying he'd forgotten and gone to a party instead. I tried to maintain a cordial relationship for the sake of family harmony, but it was increasingly difficult. Every family gathering turned into the Robert show, with our parents fawning over his latest achievements, which often turned out to be exaggerated or completely fabricated, while my accomplishments were barely acknowledged. Fast forward to last weekend. My wonderful boyfriend Arthur, 30M, proposed to me after 3 years together. We met at a charity run I had organized for the local animal shelter. Arthur was a volunteer, and we bonded over our love for dogs and our shared passion for community service. He's been my rock, supporting me through tough times at work and always being there to listen when family issues got me down. When he proposed during a surprise picnic in the park where we first met, I was overjoyed. We decided to have an engagement party to celebrate with our closest friends and family. I spent weeks planning every detail, from the menu, which included dishes representing significant moments in our relationship, to the decorations, featuring photos from our 3 years together. I explicitly told my parents that I didn't want Robert there, given our history. I explained that I wanted one special day that wasn't overshadowed by Robert's antics. They pleaded with me to reconsider, saying he'd changed and deserved another chance. My mom guilt-tripped me, saying, "He's your brother, and family should be there for these moments." Against my better judgment, I reluctantly agreed, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Robert had matured. The party started off well. Our friends and family were mingling, everyone was congratulating us, and the atmosphere was joyful. Arthur's parents, who had flown in from out of state, were chatting happily with my mom and stepdad. My best friend from college, Sylvia, had surprised me by flying in for the event. Everything was perfect. Then Robert showed up, 3 hours late and clearly intoxicated. He stumbled in, spilling his drink on Sylvia's dress, and loudly demanded to know where the good booze was hidden. The special cocktails I had carefully planned, each named after a significant moment in our relationship, weren't strong enough for him. I tried to quietly ask him to leave, but he made a scene, shouting that I was being a stuck-up bitch and that he had every right to be there. He then proceeded to give an impromptu, slurred speech about how Arthur was too good for me and how I'd always been the family disappointment. He brought up embarrassing stories from our childhood, twisting them to make me look bad. I could see Arthur's parents exchanging concerned glances, probably wondering what kind of family they were marrying into. The final straw came when Robert, in his drunken state, knocked over the table with our engagement cake. The cake, which Arthur's mother had spent days making as a surprise for us, was ruined. It had been a beautiful 3-tiered creation, each layer representing a year of our relationship. Robert just laughed it off, saying we could just order a pizza or something. I lost it. Years of pent-up frustration came pouring out. I yelled at Robert, telling him he was no longer welcome in my life and that I was done trying to maintain a relationship with someone who clearly had no respect for me. I brought up all the times he'd hurt me, from the charm bracelet incident to the concert tickets to the countless times he'd taken advantage of my kindness. I told our parents that if they couldn't see how toxic Robert's behavior was, then maybe I needed to distance myself from them too. Robert was eventually escorted out by some of Arthur's friends, but the damage was done. The party was ruined, and I was left feeling embarrassed and hurt. Sylvia spent the rest of the evening trying to comfort me, while Arthur did his best to salvage the situation with our guests. His parents were gracious, but I could tell they were shocked by what had transpired. In the days following the party, my parents have been calling and texting nonstop. They're begging me to forgive Robert, saying he was just having a bad day and didn't mean what he said. They're insisting that cutting him out would destroy the family. My mom even said, "Your wedding won't be complete without your brother there." It's like they've completely forgotten about the scene he caused at the engagement party, let alone the years of torment I've endured. Arthur is furious and wants to ban Robert from our wedding and all future family events. He says he can't stand to see me hurt like this anymore. I agree with him, but I'm worried about the fallout with my parents and the rest of the family. Some extended family members have been reaching out, urging me to reconcile with Robert for the sake of family unity. I'm tired of being the one who always has to compromise and forgive, while Robert faces no consequences for his actions. I feel like I'm at a crossroads. Do I once again give in to family pressure and let Robert be part of my wedding day, risking another disaster? Or do I stand firm, potentially causing a rift in the family but finally prioritizing my own well-being? Am I overreacting by wanting to cut Robert out of my life? Should I give him yet another chance for the sake of family peace? Or is it time to stand my ground and prioritize my own well-being and my future with Arthur? Update 1. It's been about a month since the engagement party fiasco, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. It really helped me gain perspective on the situation and gave me the courage to stand my ground. After taking some time to cool down and gather my thoughts, I decided to have a serious talk with my parents. I invited them over to my place without Robert, making it clear that this was a conversation about my relationship with them, not about Robert. I spent days preparing for this conversation, writing down key points I wanted to address and practicing what I wanted to say. When they arrived, I could tell they were apprehensive. My mom tried to immediately start talking about Robert, but I firmly redirected the conversation. I laid everything out on the table. I told them about all the times Robert had hurt me over the years, not just the recent incident. I brought up specific examples, the charm bracelet, the concert tickets, the car incident, and explained how each event had chipped away at my trust and self-esteem. I explained how their constant defense of his behavior had made me feel invalidated and unimportant in the family. I told them about the times I had achieved something I was proud of, like organizing that charity run where I met Arthur, only to have it overshadowed by Robert's latest drama. I was honest about how their pressure to forgive Robert was damaging our relationship, making me dread family gatherings and question my place in the family. To my surprise, my mom broke down in tears. She admitted that they had always known Robert's behavior was problematic, but they were afraid of confronting it. Apparently, Robert had struggled with substance abuse issues in his teens, something I hadn't known, and they were always walking on eggshells, afraid he'd relapse if they were too hard on him. My mom shared a story from when Robert was 16. They had found drugs in his room and confronted him about it. Robert had become so angry that he disappeared for 3 days. They were terrified, imagining all sorts of horrible scenarios. When he finally came home, they were so relieved that they promised themselves they'd do anything to keep him on track. This explained a lot about their permissive attitude towards Robert, but it didn't excuse it. My stepdad was more defensive at first. He talked about how hard it had been to blend our families, how he had always tried to treat me like his own daughter. But as the conversation progressed, he started to see how their approach had backfired. He acknowledged that in trying to help Robert, they had inadvertently hurt me. He admitted that he had often taken the easy route of giving in to Robert rather than confronting the real issues. We talked for hours, bringing up old incidents and working through years of built-up resentment. I shared how I had always felt like an outsider in our blended family, how Robert's constant put-downs had affected my self-esteem well into adulthood. My parents listened, really listened, perhaps for the first time in years. It was emotionally exhausting, but also cathartic. By the end of the conversation, my parents agreed that their handling of the situation had been wrong. They promised to stop pressuring me to forgive Robert and to respect my decision to distance myself from him. My mom, through tears, told me she was proud of the strong woman I had become and that she was sorry for not showing it more often. They also revealed that after the engagement party incident, they had finally confronted Robert about his behavior. Apparently, he's agreed to enter a rehab program for his alcohol issues. While I'm glad he's getting help, I made it clear to my parents that this doesn't automatically fix our relationship. I told them I needed time and space, and that any potential reconciliation would be on my terms, not theirs. We also talked about the wedding. I stood firm on my decision not to invite Robert, and to my relief, my parents didn't push back. They agreed that after his behavior at the engagement party, it would be best for him not to attend. My mom did ask if they could possibly do a small, separate celebration with Robert after the wedding, which I said I'd consider depending on Robert's progress and behavior. As for Arthur, he's been incredibly supportive through all of this. He stood by my decision to talk to my parents alone, understanding that I needed to address these long-standing family issues. When I told him about the outcome of the conversation, he was cautiously optimistic but reminded me that actions speak louder than words. We've decided together that Robert will not be invited to our wedding, regardless of his progress in rehab. Arthur has been clear that his priority is my happiness and well-being, and he'll support whatever decisions I make regarding my family. We've thrown ourselves into wedding planning, which has been a welcome distraction. We're focusing on creating a day that celebrates our love and the supportive community we've built around us. Arthur suggested that instead of a traditional brother-sister dance, which I had been dreading, we could do a special dance with Sylvia, my best friend who's been more of a sibling to me than Robert ever was. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I feel heard and validated by my parents. There's still a long way to go, and I'm under no illusions that everything is magically fixed. But it feels like a step in the right direction. I'm focusing now on planning our wedding and building a life with Arthur. I'm also considering talking to a counselor to work through some of the lingering issues from my family dynamics. The conversation with my parents brought up a lot of old hurts, and I think it might be helpful to process those with a professional. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It really gave me the strength to have this difficult but necessary conversation with my parents. I'll update again if there are any significant developments. Update 2. It's been about 3 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some recent developments. First, the wedding planning is in full swing, and it's been a welcome distraction from the family drama. Arthur and I have settled on a date 6 months from now, and we're excited about creating a day that truly reflects us as a couple. We've decided on a garden ceremony followed by a reception at a beautiful old barn that we're decorating ourselves. It's a lot of work, but it's been fun to pour our energy into something positive. As for the situation with Robert, things have been complicated. He completed his 30-day rehab program about a month ago. My parents, ecstatic about his progress, immediately started pushing for a family reconciliation. They called me, talking about how Robert was a changed man and how he wanted to make amends. I stood my ground, reminding them of our previous conversation and my need for space. Despite my wishes, Robert reached out to me directly last week. He sent a long email, apologizing for his behavior at the engagement party and acknowledging the years of hurt he'd caused. He talked about his struggles with alcohol and how rehab had opened his eyes to the pain he'd inflicted on others. He mentioned specific incidents, the charm bracelet, the concert tickets, the time he humiliated me in front of my crush, and took full responsibility for his actions. The email seemed heartfelt, but I couldn't help feeling skeptical given our history. In his email, Robert also shared some of his own struggles that I hadn't known about. He talked about feeling pressured to live up to our stepdad's expectations, and how he turned to alcohol to cope with feelings of inadequacy. He mentioned that he'd always been jealous of my accomplishments and the easy relationship I seemed to have with our mom. While this provided some context for his behavior, I reminded myself that it didn't excuse it. I shared the email with Arthur, and we had a long discussion about how to proceed. We agreed that while Robert's efforts to change were commendable, 30 days of sobriety didn't erase years of hurt. We decided to respond with a polite but firm email, acknowledging his apology but maintaining our boundaries. In the email, I told Robert that I appreciated his apology and was glad he was getting help. However, I also made it clear that I needed more time and that trust, once broken, takes a long time to rebuild. I reiterated that he would not be invited to the wedding, as that decision was final. I explained that while I was open to the possibility of rebuilding our relationship in the future, it would need to happen slowly and on my terms. Robert's response surprised me. Instead of the angry outburst I half expected, he wrote back saying he understood and respected our decision. He said he hoped that over time, he could prove through his actions that he had changed, but he wouldn't push for a relationship I wasn't ready for. He even offered to write a letter to Arthur apologizing for his behavior at the engagement party. This mature response has left me feeling conflicted. On one hand, it seems like Robert might genuinely be trying to change. On the other, I can't forget the years of hurt and the disastrous engagement party. Arthur has been my rock through all of this, reminding me that it's okay to take things slow and prioritize my own well-being. My parents, predictably, are still pushing for a faster reconciliation. They've been hinting that excluding Robert from the wedding is cruel and that I should reconsider. My mom even suggested that Robert could attend just the ceremony, not the reception, as a compromise. I've had to firmly remind them several times of the boundaries we discussed. It's frustrating, but I'm standing my ground. In an attempt to shift their focus, I've been trying to involve my parents more in the wedding planning. I took my mom dress shopping, and we had a nice day together. For a few hours, it felt like old times, before all the family drama. My stepdad has been helping with some DIY projects for the reception decor. These moments have been nice, but there's still an underlying tension whenever Robert's name comes up. In happier news, Arthur and I have decided to take a short trip next month, just the two of us. We both feel we need some time away from all the wedding planning and family drama. We're going to a small beach town where we had our first weekend getaway as a couple. We're looking forward to relaxing, reconnecting, and remembering why we're going through all this stress in the first place. Sylvia, my best friend, has been an incredible support through all of this. She's taken on a lot of the wedding planning tasks, giving Arthur and me some breathing room. She's also been a great sounding board when I need to vent about family issues. I'm so grateful to have her in my life and even more certain of my decision to have her stand in place of Robert for the sibling dance at the wedding. As the wedding gets closer, I'm trying to focus on the positive. Arthur and I are building a life together, surrounded by friends and family who truly support us. While the situation with Robert is still unresolved, I'm proud of myself for maintaining boundaries and prioritizing my own well-being. As always, thank you all for your support and advice. It's been a challenging few months, but I feel stronger and more confident in my decisions. I'll update again after the wedding, or if there are any major changes in the situation with Robert. Update 3. It's been about 8 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. Arthur and I got married 2 months ago, and despite some family tension, it was a beautiful day filled with love and joy. In the lead up to the wedding, my parents finally seemed to accept that Robert wouldn't be there. They stopped pushing the issue, which made our interactions much more pleasant. Robert, true to his word, respected our decision and didn't try to contact us about the wedding. He did send a gift, a beautiful set of handmade pottery he'd apparently made himself as part of his therapy, with a note congratulating us and wishing us well. The ceremony itself was perfect. The garden was in full bloom, and the weather cooperated beautifully. We kept it relatively small, with just our closest friends and family. Sylvia, as my maid of honor, gave a touching speech that had everyone in tears, happy ones, this time. The sibling dance with her was a highlight of the reception. There was a moment during the reception when I caught my mom looking a bit sad, and I knew she was thinking about Robert's absence. But to her credit, she didn't bring it up and instead focused on celebrating with us. My stepdad seemed to be making a real effort to connect with Arthur's family, which I appreciated. After returning from our honeymoon, 2 weeks in Greece, which was amazing, I decided it was time to cautiously re-establish some contact with Robert. I sent him a brief email, thanking him for respecting our wishes about the wedding and asking how he was doing. His response was positive but not pushy. He shared that he was still sober and attending regular AA meetings. He also mentioned that he had started seeing a therapist to work on his underlying issues. Last month, Arthur and I agreed to meet Robert for coffee. It was surprisingly okay. Robert was sober, apologetic, and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about our lives without making it all about him. He brought up some specific incidents from our past and took full responsibility for his actions without making excuses. It was the first time I felt like he truly understood the impact of his behavior. We're taking things very slowly. We've agreed to occasional family dinners, but I've made it clear that rebuilding trust will take time. Robert seems to understand and respect this. He's been consistent in his sobriety and has even started volunteering at a local youth center, which has given him a new sense of purpose. My parents are overjoyed that we're making an effort to reconnect, but I've had to remind them several times not to push too hard. They're learning to respect our boundaries, though it's clearly a struggle for them sometimes. We've had a few family dinners together, and while they've been a bit awkward, they've also been civil and even pleasant at times. Arthur has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He's cautiously optimistic about Robert's changes but reminds me that it's okay if I need to step back at any point. We're focusing on our life together, settling into our new home, and even starting to talk about future plans for children. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of my relationship with Robert, but I'm also proud of myself for maintaining boundaries and prioritizing my own well-being in my marriage. It's been a long, complicated journey, but I feel like I've grown a lot through this experience. Thank you all for your support throughout this whole process. Your advice and encouragement have been invaluable. While I don't think I'll need to post any more updates, know that your kindness has made a real difference in my life.